So Oliver Glasner guided Crystal Palace to their first ever major trophy. Crystal Palace, the Eagles, will be in Europe next season, beating Manchester City 1-0 in the FA Cup. That early goal from Eze proved to be the difference. How did they score it? What tactical setup did Glasner do in the game? What did maybe Pep do again to kind of cause that problem? I think one of the issues that he had, not having that holding midfielder, proved, I think, absolutely vital in that first goal. And not saying that if it would have Rodri, but if they put someone else there, someone who could have maybe sat, we could have seen something a lot more different. And I really want to focus on as well the misconception that we know Crystal Palace counter-attack, and we knew that with their low possession numbers that the counter-attack would be their ideal kind of opportunity to score. But the goal actually comes from build-up from the back. It actually starts with a goal kick, and we're going to dive into that. We're going to show you the importance of doing it against Henderson, just kicking long, and why it's so important. Let's go. So here's how the teams line up. As we said, there was no Nico for Manchester City. There was no Gundogan. There was no Kovacic. I think they went with, De Bruyne and Silva in there because they knew that, obviously, Crystal Palace were going to literally hold back in this at what times looked even like a... Sometimes looked like a straight 5-5, but generally was a 5-4-1 out of possession, sitting really deep. So they went with two wide players. They went with pretty much Marmoush playing in and around Haaland. And it was almost like a 4-2-4 with, at times, Nico Riley going in there, playing sort of like this 3-5-2 kind of shape in possession with no real sitter, and that proved to be the problem. So what we've spoke about is the goal that they scored, and what they want to create is a little bit of space in here for Mateta. Now, if Dean Henderson just generally went long, it might look something like that, where they're just, let me get a ball out, let's give Dean a ball. If he was expecting, the goal kicks to go long, he'd look something a little bit like this, and you'd be still trying to obviously hit Mateta. Man City, you knew would get a high line, but the issue is with the bodies that you get in here, there isn't much space to work in at all. It becomes very crowded, very congested. So what they want to do is try and open this space out as much as possible, and this is where it came down to the only goal of the game. And by playing short, what it does do is, obviously, we know Manchester City are going to squeeze high. There was Marmoush and Haaland extremely high. Silva and De Bruyne went and jumped on sort of like the double pivot of Wharton and Kamada. And it left this huge space in here. And it gave him that opportunity just to fire a ball, not straight from the goal kick, but it allowed, playing it short, allowed Crystal Palace to bait the press from Manchester City, suck them in. And then when the timer is right, can they hit a quality pass into a Mateta who's pinned one at the centre half? And it's exactly what they did. It worked absolutely perfectly. As you can see with the little screenshots that I've taken now, the ball's moving into Chris Richards. He gets it on his left foot and plays a long pass into Mateta, who works well with Kamada. Wait for that overlapping run of Muniz on that right-hand side, and then a lovely low cross to find Eze, who's arriving late into the penalty area. And if we take a look at this is a really cool little thing that you can find on the Opta Analyst. It kind of shows you on a tactical board how the goal is developed. So you can see the straight lines are passes, so it now goes into Richards, who then fires it long into Mateta, holds it up, plays and works with a little 1-2 with Kamada. Ball out wide, Muniz makes that run, and then that low cutting cross to Eze, who fires it in. So quick passes. It looks a little, you could argue that the scenario here with this screenshot does kind of show you that potentially it could have been a turnover in possession, but Crystal Palace absolutely planned this to a T. However, I do think if Manchester City potentially have not been as gung-ho and maybe gone with a Nico, and I'm not sure if Nico was actually fit, but having someone in there, I think, would have been absolutely key, because they knew that the danger would have been Mateta. Playing into Mateta, having people around him having that space, and by just having someone in there, I think would have cut it out. They could have still pressed high with the three attackers, the two wide players and Haaland, and have De Bruyne and Silva really high on the double pivots of Palace. But that's where they really slipped up, I think. Just having someone in there to maybe try and shut things out at feet, or trying to cut out headers, and still having that defender come round, but just shutting him out and making him have no room kind of with his back to play would have been an easy fix. But Pep does what Pep wants in these finals, doesn't he? We're now going to put it into FM. Warning, this is a tactical recreation. I have not done anything to try and make it look amazing, fantastic in the game. I've not done it so it scored you 3 million goals in a game. That's not what this channel is about. However, towards the end of the video, I am going to discuss tweaks you want to make. I think it's always a good, you want to start with a Glasner blueprint. This is your tactic. And then from that, you can change your mentality. You can change the high line. You can change a couple of roles. And we'll talk about the role of the double pivot as well. In particular, Kamada, because he's more of a high 8 kind of playmaker rather than a holding midfielder. So things to discuss in terms of that. That will be at the end of the video. Tweaks you can make to kind of make it a little bit more flattering in FM. But we've just played the first game of the season against Brentford, and it's been an absolutely Glasner masterclass in the first game. So we'll dive into that as well. All the tactics are available in the Patreon down in the description if you want to check it out. You can have the file as a direct download, etc. Supports me as a creator. This is now like part-time job, so I appreciate it if you go check it out. If not, don't worry, we're going to go through all the team and player instructions throughout the video so you can copy it into your own FM24 save yourself. All right, guys, let's get into it. Glasner. Okay, so this is what we're trying to achieve here. This is the Glasner 3-4-3. First of all, we'll go through the team instruction. So balanced mentality, I think that's important because we're going to allow the defenders to defend, the attackers to attack, and allow those player roles and mentalities and duties dictate kind of how the team plays in and out of possession. So in possession, we've gone with standard width. Not overly wide. We're naturally going to get that width anyway from the two wing backs, but we don't necessarily need it too wide and too open. We want Eze and Sarr to drift into those two sort of like half spaces. Pass into space, yes, I think that will help with our counter-attacking. We want to try and release Mateta. Mateta's very good at working channels. Can we release Sarr down that right-hand side? Can we even maybe release a Muniz down that right-hand side? Okay, so very important with a counter-attack, I think. The overlap on the right, holding up the play when we can, and allowing Muniz to kind of, as it says here, most likely a marauding fullback, allowing Muniz to get round. So that's extremely important. Slightly more direct because we want to play into, remember, baiting the press and clipping that ball into either one of the high 10s or playing it in off Mateta. Higher tempo, if you're going to do it, it needs to be quick. Once they got that ball into Mateta, it was pass, cross, and goal. So that is super important, and time wasted sometimes. I think depending on which, I've just kind of put that in the middle. I think depending on who you're playing and what kind of game state you're in, you need to be moving that backwards and forwards if you want that real sort of like Glasner. When they're wanting to get forward and wanting to dominate games, they press a lot higher than what they did in the FA Cup final. But this one is very much just based on the FA Cup final. Play for set pieces. Gay, Chris Richards, Lacroix, Mateta, dangerous from set pieces. So we're going to obviously have that one on. Into transition. No counter press or regroup. We're just leaving that blank. Counter attacking, yes. We want to try and create those little transitions where we get the ball into the front three as quickly as possible. Can we win it and then counter attack with the two wing backs? And we've got a really good goal to show you against Brentford. Slow the pace down. We're going to take our time. We're going to allow the opposition to get set. We're going to get set like they pretty much did with that goal kick. And then we're going to distribute to our centre-backs, take short kicks. Most teams as well in FM, and we'll see it. Well, actually, with one of the goals, or at least one of the highlights in the Brentford game, Brentford are trying to press us really high, and it works really well because we can play around them. Remember, if we go long, the pitch comes kind of really congested, 50-50 duels, not much opportunity then to have space for a Mateta to bring it down like he did for the goal, so super important. And then out of possession, standard line, but with a low block because we know they sat right back, was it 28% possession or something, and invite crosses. Manchester City had 33 crosses with a success rate of 21%. And just to flip that on the other side, crosses, Crystal Palace, 6. Crossing accuracy, 50%. I think they had another one in early on in the first half. Who nipped it at the near post? Should have called, was that Mateta maybe really early on before they scored? That came from a cross on the right. So yeah, super clinical and allowing that ball to come into the box. I think when you've got players like Mitchell and Munoz are very good at defending as fullbacks, naturally kind of fullbacks, and then three big boys in there with a pivot of Kamada and Wharton right in front. As you could see with the positioning of Wharton in particular, he didn't go very far. He sat right in front of there, balls into the box. He was dealing with him pretty well. Kamada did a decent job, not his natural game, but did extremely well in those deep sort of like areas when balls were constantly flying into the box. So there is the base formation that we'll cover in a minute, but I just want to show you the goals that we've just scored against Brentford. So as you can see, there's our pre-season look. We're expected to beat teams in there, but it was a tremendous start to the season. So Brentford are pressing, they're running down the wing. We're going to get that ball back. Camp to the edge area. Wharton breaks it down. Then Mateta's found that little bit of areas that target forward. We're on the break. Mitchell down the left, cutting in and winning. Now, I know the goal didn't come from a come from a build-up. It didn't come from that little give and go. But with the target man on attack, you get this, where he's coming in to help out. We've got that low block look, but he's in a really good position there. For me, like the rest defence from Brentford is really poor. We get that a lot in Football Manager as well, where players are allowed to be free. And then we're off. And he's only on support, is Mitchell. We've got him on the support role, but look at what he's trying to do, create that width. I think what it does do as well is we get that from the wing-backs because of the role that we've got of Eze. We've not got Eze as a winger or an inverted winger. He's naturally going to come inside. So it allows that space for Mitchell to gallop into. And then Mateta, very much like the chance that he had early on in the FA Cup, actually, where I think they worked it down the right-hand side and he got in at the near post to tap home. And then the second one actually comes from a goal kick. So here we are, look, Richards playing out from the back. A little bit different in kind of build-up because Wharton's found it free. But we work it and then we get Munoz. What's happened here is Lewis Potter's coming to engage with Wharton because the Brentford midfield have sat quite placid. Look, they've dropped off. Allowed us to play. Crystal Palace will play. Like, you want Wharton on the ball. Man, the game against Manchester City was not the game, was it, to do that? And they obviously were pressed really high with De Bruyne. So what they did was we kind of miss out if we just take it back a little bit. So here's the goal kick. You know, we just miss out that pass because what happened is the Manchester City, these three players were a lot higher and it allowed that space to go into there. And as you can see, Mateta and Sarr pretty much act as a front two, pinning back those fullbacks and defenders, and then we finally do work it out to Munoz, who then finds Sarr this time. It's a low cross again. Lovely ball. It could have reached Eze on that left-hand side, but Mateta finished off wonderfully. And then once again, we create like this is pretty much from build. It's not a goal kick, but Henderson has got it in his hands. We play out to the left, which they did, and then out to Mitchell on this left-hand side. Eze in, Mateta holding up, and then once again, that ball swept outside to Munoz. Sarr, I think what happens is with the movement of Sarr, what it does do, it pins in that full back and it allows that inverted run from Sarr, then allows Munoz to get that space on that right-hand side. And we should do better. Sarr has a shot and just goes over. But then we soon actually made it 3. Richards driving forward this time into Munoz down this right-hand side. Pull back to Sarr, cross, half cleared. Mitchell backing up on that left-hand side. Own goal in the end. But if you actually look at the goal when Eze strikes, Mitchell is right in there. So he's very much supporting the play on that left-hand side. So super way to start the season. And this is how we've put it together. Remember, Patreon's The Tactic is now available down in the description. So those are the team instructions. The player instructions, we've got Dean Henderson, sweeper, keeper, on defend. We want him to be basic. We want him to play with that back three as much as possible. Chris Richards is the interesting one. Because of how we've shifted with Munoz being a little bit higher, we've got ball-playing defender because we want him to play those riskier passes into Mateta, into the 210s. And we've also got stay wider, so he kind of works this right channel. And what that will probably do is allow Munoz to be a little bit higher, and then that will bring in Sarr. It's kind of like a domino effect of the starting position of Richards. Lacroix, central defender on defend. You could go no nonsense if you wanted to. With Mark Gahey, who obviously had to come off injured, which was disappointing during the second half. We've got him as a ball playing defender on defend as well, but no stay wider instruction with that. Mitchell, wing back on support, no other player instructions. And then say with Munoz, wing back on attack because we do want him to get further forward and cross from the byline. The two DMs are tricky. Like Wharton, he's general. Like I saw another career have him as an advanced playmaker, which was bemusing.
What an idiot! Oh, what a loser!
But in this game, very much defensive midfielder on defenders said, put that little heat map over the top of his positions. Look, as you can see on the pitch, yeah, he didn't get that far forward, did he? So defensive midfielder on defender, wasn't that playmaking element to it as well? He wasn't really involved in build-up. They tried to go long as much as possible. And then Kamada, very much doing a job. You know, at times this could be players like Lerma, Dakota, he's been injured, Will Hughes. That could very much just be any of those roles, but we've just gone defensive midfielder on support. You could go ball winning if you want that Lerma involved, but that's the pivot that we've gone with. Eze is an interesting one because I really wanted him to drift in a little bit and be a little bit narrow. If we look at his heat map throughout the season, you can see he likes to be a little bit more central. We've got him on attack as well, just so he dribbles a little bit more. If you have him on support, they end up having that real sort of like Engaunch kind of role to it at times where they just sit and play, and we want Eze to travel. You could also, we'll talk about what we could change that to actually at the end, and then Sarr, inverted winger on attack, no player instructions, with Mateta, target forward on attack. You could also do, he didn't need to do it as much, but moving to channels is definitely one that you could add in. Now, changes to be made, like playing a low block is not always great in FM. It gives you mixed results, you know. It's fantastic that we've nicked a 3-0 win. Not nicked a 3-0 win. We absolutely played superb against Brentford. But over the course of the season, you might want to be a little bit more creative. So a couple of things may be. It's crazy. You might even go on to attacking. And what that would encourage is keep the system the same and then have attacking. And that would encourage the ball getting faster and quicker further forward into those front players and maybe see more counter-attacks that way. Because all that doing is his mentality is shifting the risk. So there would probably be more long balls into the front guys, maybe more balls into the 10s, a little bit more from out the back. The other ones you could kind of, the in possession stuff, no problem. You can leave that the same. In transition, you know, counter press, you know, you could change that. You do what, you know, works in FM, and then you could increase the line as well. You know, playing with a high line would definitely work with this system, especially with the pace you've got with Richards, Lacroix and Gay. And then in terms of roles, you could have that as an inverted winger on support. You could have that as an inside forward if you wanted to on support. I wouldn't have it on attack. The AP naturally doesn't get as high as what maybe an inside forward does or inverted winger. So yeah, something to think about. I wouldn't change the wing backs either, but potentially if you're keeping Eze as that AP, you could maybe put Mitchell, the left wing back, on the WB on attack. DMs, like it could be anything. Like I'm a lover of the DLP on support with then a Volante, or you could do the anchor if you really wanted Wharton just to be that sitter who's extremely tidy in possession without really creating anything. Then you could go maybe, you know, Kamada, he likes to be a playmaker. He likes to be a register, roaming playmaker maybe. You could do that, no problem. Ball-playing defenders, I would leave them as they are. There's no real need to change them. And, you know, you don't want to go into Libero, Lacroix. You don't want him stepping in there. And, yeah, that is it. Oliver Glasner's Masterclass from the FA Cup final. Later on in the week, check it out because we've got Antonio Conte's Serie A winning Napoli coming probably, we'll go tomorrow